Further on the bill as amended, Representative Buck-Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've heard a number of stories tonight that really tug at our hearts. We heard about Representative Tong's mother. We heard about Representative Alanafi's family. We saw Representative O'Day become emotional about Sandy Hook. And quite honestly, I could talk about my mother having gotten mugged. All of those situations involved non-family members. None of those situations had a family member, domestically related, cause the harm to Representative Tong's mother, my mother, Al Danafi's family, or those poor children in Sandy Hook. So I would like to bring us back to what this bill is about, which is guns and domestic violence. So, if I may, through you, Mr. Speaker, a couple of questions to the proponent of the bill.
Please proceed, ma'am.
Thank you. Representative Tong, can you tell me how many people have been killed in Connecticut in a domestic violence incident subsequent to a restraining order being served? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I do not know the answer to that question. I believe I cited a statistic earlier that there are roughly 14 intimate partner homicides in Connecticut every year, but I don't know the answer to your specific question. Through you.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
Thank you for your response. Do we know how many of those were by a gun causing death? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
Through you, I believe it's 39%.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
39% of, if I may, through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
Sorry, 39% of the 14.
Okay. You're making me do math, okay.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any other states that have a statute similar to this one? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
There are there are 20 states. They're all different, but there are other states that provide similar relief. They include Texas, West Virginia, Utah, Montana, Nebraska, our neighbors in Massachusetts. There are 20 states that provide, on a restraining order, relief from the threat of firearms. Through you.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, if I may inquire as to what the position is in those states as to an ex parte restraining order, not just a restraining order. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I cannot, unfortunately, on the fly, cite chapter and verse from each of these states. I know there are materials that I'd be happy to share after the debate that detail what the other states do. I believe that other states, some states are identical to us in the ex parte context, and other states have different standards. I can't cite all of them for you right now. Through you.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, leaving chapter and verse aside, through you to Representative Tong, do we have any statistics as to the effectiveness of any of the states that have bills, statutes identical to the one that's being proposed here as to ex parte restraining orders? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tong.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I do not have that information. I have other statistics that may be instructive. For example, for every case in which a woman kills an intimate partner in self-defense, 83 women are themselves killed. But I don't have information on the effectiveness of these statutes in other states.
Representative Buck-Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, so what I'm hearing is that we don't have any statistics that show that having a statute that infringes upon people's constitutional rights to the level that this one does actually has the effect that we would all be hoping it would have, which is reducing fatalities in domestic violence situations after a restraining order has been served. I don't believe that before we find out whether or not something is effective, we should use it across the board. The risk warrant statute provides an opportunity for people to get the help that they need. This statute, with no proof of its effectiveness, is infringing on the constitutional rights of people without there being any proof that it's an effective method for reducing domestic violence, which is something that all of us in this chamber want to see reduced. I feel a little bit like we are using a broom or a sledgehammer, where we need to look possibly more at a scalpel approach. So I have a lot of concerns about this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity and for Representative Tong for answering my questions so politely.